All right, having looked at perspective, we've got a spatial system, a way to think about the world that we're observing in a spatial sense. So now we're going to start moving away from just a flat way of looking that we've been working with primarily the first part of the semester in order to see things like proportion better or the angles at which things move. Seeing things flat was important. It will continue to be important. But now we want to broaden our scope of thinking about what we're looking at and to include the idea of roundness or volume. And the idea we're going to look at today is called mass conception. It's a very traditional drawing idea, which is based on the notion that if we understand very simple volumetric forms like the geometric solids, then we can apply those ideas to more complex forms. So the simple geometric solids that we're going to focus on, there are a lot of them out there, but the four mother forms that I tend to use the most are, number one, the spherical form. So this is just a circle until I give it roundness. So I just add construction lines to show that that's a rounded form. So the sphere, cylinder form, the cone, and then what we've just been working with in perspective, which is the rectangular solid. So the idea that these four forms, and again there are others that you'll see used sometimes like a pyramid form, but these are the four that I use the most, and again the idea is that any more complex form that we see, we can conceptualize that in terms of some combination of these forms. So in other words, when I look at that vase up here, it doesn't fit these perfectly, but I can see that this part up here, because it flares, is like the cone that's upside down. Right? This area in here is rounded, so it's like a sphere, or you could say, well, it tapers, so it's like a cone. It's really kind of a combination of the two. And you can make your own hybrids of these shapes if it helps you to do that. The main thing is to keep them simple, so that you have a very good idea of what that simple volume is. And then this lower part from here to here is like a cylinder. So the idea is that if I can grasp what a cylinder feels like, or what its roundness is like, and what a sphere's roundness is like, and what a cone's roundness is like, then I'll have a nice beginning place to start thinking about the volume of that form before I get into the complication of light and shadow. So it's really important. What we're doing here is just trying to kind of flip the switch, going from a flat way of thinking to a more rounded way of thinking before we start actually describing the volume. And the exercise that we're going to do is going to be kind of like shop drawings. We're going to create drawings that show that we understand the roundness of each part of this form. So if I was going to do it with this object, I would start off just the way we have. I would start off flatly, just the way we've been doing. Because again, you're going to see proportion best if you're keeping things flat. So what you don't want to do is start building up a rounded form without first having thought about the proportions. So we don't kind of throw out what we've done so far. We use it at the beginning, but then we move on. All right. So the idea of a midline here is important, especially with a symmetrical form like this. When we're creating these volumes, it's good to have a center line that kind of anchors us, so that we make sure that each of these volumes that we build is symmetrical and is built around a midpoint, so that the whole thing kind of adds up and is not wonky, at the end of the day. It all kind of lines up nicely. All right. And I've also used these horizontals to indicate the important divisions. So those are the places where I'm going to have different forms. Right? So then once I've got this, I work my proportions a little bit more, but for time's sake, we'll sort of go on. So this one up here, I said, is like a cone that's upside down. And then it's truncated, right? So the idea here is to build a form, and I'm going to build it as if it was an individual form, that if I separated these, I could see the volume of that form. I can even throw in an extra construction line. And what I'm doing down here is I'm doing what's called drawing through, which is I don't see the back end of that curve, but I want to draw through so that I'm telling myself, okay, I know what that volume is. I don't want to just start up here, show the volume, go down here, and then leave it flat like that, because that doesn't really give me a complete sense of what that volume is. So if I was constructing this out of wood, if I was trying to show someone how to make each of these individual wood pieces volumetric, I've got to take care of the tops and the bottoms of each of these forms so you get a sense of the roundness of that form. Okay. So here's the here's that cone that I've truncated, right? Sort of cut off that cone. All right, in this area in here, because it's bulging on the edge, I could make it a cone, but I could also think of like a spherical or egg-like shape that is in here that's rounded, right? So it gives me a rounded, rather, if I just use a cone, it's going to be flat instead of rounded on the edge. Right? So drawing through, and again, really important to draw through for a lot of reasons. All right, and then this down here, so here I've got sort of an egg shape or a rounded form, right? And then down here I've got a cylinder shape. Again, drawing through. And remember, with each of these rounded forms, the further below your eye level you go, the more curved this is going to be. And all of these, whenever you've got a rounded form, I think as I've said before, when it's sitting on a horizontal ground plane, your ellipse is going to have a horizontal axis to it. So in other words, the long point of this is going to be a horizontal, 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 horizontal. It's not going to be, it's not going to be tipped in any way, that ellipse. It's going to be a horizontal. It's sitting on a horizontal ground plane. All right, so I've got the top of the cylinder and then the bottom part of the cylinder. I'm going to have more curve, because I'm seeing a bigger area of that ellipse because it's further below my eye level, right? So this, and this is deceptive again, I think maybe as I've mentioned before, we tend to kind of see the opening. So we make a lot of like an opening like this, but then there's a tendency when we get down here, we don't see that other side, and so we tend to flatten that out. And that's the opposite of what we want to do. We want to show more curve than we do up here because we're seeing more of this ellipse than we are of this one, or it's a wider ellipse because it's further below our eye level. We're looking down on that circular form more when we're down here. Okay, so then I might throw in just an extra construction line. So these really important to use your construction lines, use your verticals, use your horizontals to divide up the form. Draw through, put in elliptical shapes that'll help you, just give you a better sense of the volume of that form. Okay?